My friend thinks consultants are smarter than lawyers. I think we're both dumb, but I'm going to try to prove today that he's dumber. I'm a Wall Street corporate lawyer, and I'm going to do an MBB case interview and see how I do. MBB is an acronym for McKinsey, Bain, and BCG. Another acronym in an acronym. Boston Consulting Group. They're the top three management consulting firms.
Our client, Eurolegal, is a prestigious global law firm headquartered in Europe and known for its strong presence in corporate law, finance, and regulatory matters. The firm is considering acquiring U.S. Legal, a well-established U.S. law firm that has deep expertise in transactional law and a strong presence in the U.S. legal market. If completed, the acquisition would create a 4,000 lawyer firm across 47 offices with $3.7 billion in revenue to position Eurolegal as a dominant player in transatlantic legal services. Eurolegal's leadership is evaluating whether proceeding with the acquisition of US Legal is the right strategic move. They've engaged our consulting team to assess whether the deal aligns with their long-term vision, evaluate potential synergies and risks, and determine if financial and operational benefits outweigh the challenges.
Okay, so this is a very targeted question because it's very similar to the firm I'm at, and I'm sure the firm also hired a bunch of consultants as well to manage things. So typically, people ask some questions. So here's the most basic question. What are some of the goals for this acquisition? Is it market expansion, revenue growth, synergies? What's the motivation for this acquisition?
Eurolegal has a strong presence in Europe and Asia but lacks scale in the U.S. market. U.S. Legal provides a well-established platform in the U.S., particularly in corporate, capital markets, and litigation. Eurolegal aims to achieve 15% revenue growth by 2026, and this acquisition is expected to help reach that target through cross-selling opportunities, fee structure optimizations, and geographical expansion.
Okay. Any specific targets that we're looking at in terms of return on investment or beyond the 15% revenue growth by 2026?
Targeting an additional $250 million in cross-selling revenue by leveraging U.S. Legal's U.S. corporate client base with Eurolegal's international legal services. We also want to expand high-margin practices like private equity, M&A, capital markets in the U.S. and Europe.
Great. So we have some targets for revenue and growth. Any specific timeline for this acquisition, for not only the acquisition process, but the full integration between firms?
Eurolegal has a 3-year integration plan. We can get into the details later.
So just to be sure, you said full growth by 2026, but it's also year 3 in the plan that you discussed. Are we assuming it's 2023 now? Or should we fix the 2026 to 2028? Okay, perfect. Great. If you could just give me a couple of minutes to structure my thoughts, I will try to put them down and then share it with you. So, just as an aside, I memorized some common case frameworks, and I did a bit of research into the case interview process. I didn't get much practice, but I know that M&A is a very common sort of case question, and there's a specific framework about like. Well, okay, let's look into this. So, standalone value, right? Synergies, and things like here I would kind of look at growth. What is it? Valuation. And this is more like revenue. This is like, I guess, like pricing. It's just revenue cost. Here we need to think about a lot of things like internal. Okay, so let me walk you through how I would approach this. Here, I would kind of look at three major categories to deal with this. So first, we're going to look at the standalone value of the firm itself, the target. So is U.S. law or U.S. legal an attractive investment on its own? We need to determine whether we want this as a standalone firm before we consider synergies. But the next category is synergies. You know, what are the sort of incremental values that neither firm could achieve on its own? I would focus here on sort of revenue growth and cost reduction in terms of synergies. And finally, in the last category, I would look at whether even if U.S. legal is valuable on its own and its synergies are compelling, the kind of execution challenges that could be a hurdle to the deal. And I would assess the internal as well as external sort of concerns, as well as the feasibility concerns. Now, looping back to the first category of the standalone value, I want to look at three distinct subcategories. So, growth, valuation, and price. In terms of growth, I really want to know what the future revenue potential of this U.S. legal firm is. What is sort of the projected growth over the next 3-5 years? Does it have high growth practice areas like private equity, M&A, capital markets that'll drive long-term profitability for these big law firms? How diversified is the U.S. legal client base, and do the key clients show high retention rates? These are some of the considerations for future revenue. Moving on to the second sort of subcategory is the future valuation. Or sorry, not future valuation, but the present valuation. Does U.S. legal valuation, is it competitive with other peer firms? Is the price that Eurolegal would pay based off of, say, just basic figures like EBITDA, revenue multiples, or their precedent transactions? There haven't been a lot of, big law mergers, but there have been some precedents that we could look to. And we also want to look at, does U.S. legal offer a good return on investment if acquired at its current valuation? Finally, I want to look at the price. Excuse me. So I want to see if, by price, I want to kind of look at the internal operations of U.S. legal. Does it operate efficiently? Is its sort of overhead costs high? Maybe a better name for price would be sort of economics of this firm. How do the sort of cost per lawyer and the profit per equity partner compared to industry benchmarks? And does the firm have a sustainable cost structure that makes it attractive on its own? If we can demonstrate that U.S. legal has, strong revenue growth, a pretty efficient operation, as well as attractive valuation multiples, it would indicate that the firm is a worthwhile acquisition, even if there aren't any synergies. But if there are struggles, so things like issues with operations, with profitability, with churn and partner departures, these are things to reconsider the deal despite the synergies. Now, looking into synergies, we want to look at two major factors when it comes to the additional value of merging these firms together: the additional revenue and the additional cost reduction. Excuse me. In terms of revenue, can Eurolegal cross-sell its sort of client base, his current client base in Europe and Asia, to the current U.S. legal American clients that that we can have sort of intermingling among clients? Can it go the other way? Can U.S. legal's strong presence in U.S. help Eurolegal gain more transatlantic deals? What are sort of the projected pro forma revenue synergies, and how long will it take to realize? I also want to look at cost reduction synergies, as it'll increase profits. Are there redundant offices that can be consolidated, especially if you have current operations in New York or London? Can they be merged together, and can some offices be closed? Can certain systems, say in the back office, like IT, HR, or the payroll, can they be integrated? Are there novel insights or knowledge sharing opportunities, say in legal technology or workflows that can reduce operational inefficiencies, whether it's in U.S. legal or Euro legal? If the revenue and cost savings synergies generate substantial long-term value, this acquisition definitely becomes even more attractive. But if these synergies take too long to materialize, or cost savings are different or very impractical to implement, then the benefits of this deal could be overstated. So I want to look at the next and final point, the kind of risks and the key drivers to actually implementing this. So here I want to first look at the internal risks. So here I foresee the big one would be cultural, very different cultures, two different firms. Another would be retention. That could be the major killer, actually, because the partner departures can substantially affect the economics of the firm. Another place I would look at is the clients. These are under sort of the external header. So if there is a merger, will the current profitable client stay? And I also want to look at externally the regulatory concerns. Are there antitrust issues? Are there other sort of tax issues? There's going to need to be external counsel to sort of guide this process. And finally, I want to sort of look at the feasibility in terms of the cost and time associated with going through with the merger, and also whether the systems can be sort of well merged. We talked about this in terms of saving costs, but here I kind of want to look at more of the model. So, for instance, are the billing models same across the board? Are the salaries same across the board? Are these going to prevent sort of an adequate acquisition? Now, if these risks are too high or too costly to mitigate, I would reconsider the acquisition or modify the deal terms. But if Eurolegal has a clear integration strategy, I think this would be a great place to gain a lot of revenue and increase synergies. Now, to summarize my approach, I looked at the standalone value of U.S. Legal, as well as the quantifiable revenue and cost synergies, and the risks and feasibility of whether this acquisition could go forward. I would recommend proceeding with this acquisition and looking closer at whether the synergies could really enhance the standalone value. I assume, the firm as a U.S. Legal is very established, has a long history, and is fairly self-sustaining. So I really think the key question is whether the synergies make sense, as well as looking at whether culturally the integration would fit well, and especially in terms of the key partners who are rainmakers.
That's great. Let's analyze the financial impact of this potential acquisition. Walk me through your thoughts on this exhibit, and does this projection account for revenue synergies, and if so, how much additional revenue is expected from the synergies?
So to determine whether 3.5 bill, whether this projection includes revenue synergy, we need to compare it to the standalone revenue of both firms. So, do we just add? Is it really that straightforward? Do we just add the two revenue totals between U.S. and Euro Legal? That gives 3.4 bill. So the revenue without synergies is $100 million. Okay, so I think I got a softball math question. So I would say we just need $100 million in synergies. So this suggests that the revenue projection includes $100 million in expected revenue synergies, and the sort of primary drivers of these synergies would likely come from cross-selling opportunities among client bases within Europe and the US. And this is a very doable target.
Great. Now, let's analyze the financial impact of partner attrition. The pre-merger partner attrition rate in the industry is 5%, but after the announcement, U.S. Legal's partner attrition rate has risen to 12%. If U.S. Legal has 300 equity partners, how many additional partners have left compared to the industry average? And what's the potential revenue impact if each partner generated $5 million in revenue?
So just to be clear, the 12% is in addition to the 5%, right? Okay, so we need to calculate how many partners would have left normally. So 5% of 300 is 15, and then let's say the new amount, 12% of 300, that's normal, and then of 300 is 36. And so we need to know how many partners left just because of the merger. So 36 minus 15 is 21. So if each partner generates 5 million, so 5. Potential revenue loss of. Okay, so the increased partner attrition results in a potential revenue loss of 105 million, and this offsets the synergies. This is bad. This means that unless Eurolegal can offset attrition, they might lose the impact of the synergies. So it would be wise to focus on attrition given the assumption of these synergies.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, what strategies could Eurolegal implement to mitigate this risk and retain key partners?
A minute to think about that. What are they? Okay. So, in order to curb partner attrition, you kind of want to look into the psychology of what drives attrition. And I've narrowed it down to 3 categories, or 3 sort of areas to look at: compensation, the culture, and the firm reputation. Under compensation, we want to introduce additional bonuses so that key partners will stay through the integration period, especially if they're rainmakers. And we also need to kind of modify or ensure that the compensation structure is such that it retains the rainmakers or the highest revenue generating partners. So when it comes to fees for what they bring in, we should carefully look at that to make sure it's competitive and that no other firms can poach them. In terms of the culture, I would try to ensure that no one firm is dominating the other. I understand it's an acquisition, but we should have joint leadership, and we should have engagement sessions with the partners to understand the issues that they're facing, as well as outlining the long-term benefits for them to stay with the firm post-merger. In terms of reputation, I think it's important to build a brand where partners are proud to be at the firm and that it will attract more clients. So strong branding there, as well as giving autonomy to key practice groups to kind of head their own direction and be experts in their fields. If Eurolegal, just based off of these rough numbers, can reduce partner attrition from 12% to 7%, they could save $50 million in retained revenues, and it would make this deal much more financially viable.
Given the challenges around talent retention and cultural integration post-merger, what innovative strategies could Eurolegal implement to ensure a smooth transition and maximize partner retention?
Yeah, let's go into more detail here in terms of retention. Just give me one moment to collect my thoughts. Okay, so in terms of compensation to encourage more retention. I think we could get a bit creative here. Again, we're going to follow the 3 sort of categories that I outlined, but go into a bit more detail and some ideas that I had that we can implement that are more specific and novel. One thing is following the, I guess, startup culture structure in terms of, rather than a generic retention bonus, having a deferred equity structure that vests over 3 to 5 years, as well as ensuring that these incentives are performance-based. We can also have a kind of leadership fast-track program so that we can encourage more of a meritocracy and ensure that partners are rewarded for additional work that they do and the clients that they bring in. And we can ensure that there are more efficiencies and that the cream rises to the top. In terms of culture, I think we could do a rotation program where partners can work from either the main European office in London or the main U.S. office in New York and switch places to encourage, foster, or to have more collaboration and knowledge sharing. I would also encourage more events in terms of retreats for top partners. We can have different road shows as well as collaborative work sessions, just a way to get partners from these different firms to work more with each other. Finally, in terms of reputation, I think we can really focus on legal tech. We can fund innovation labs and really differentiate ourselves by showing that we have, say, AI-driven legal services and that we're shaping the future of legal services by not only offering this transatlantic, international, broad law firm, this first merger of its kind, but also legal services that are buttressed by this sort of cutting-edge technology. So those are the, to be more specific, is I would take a multifaceted approach that sort of makes incentives more personal, that fosters more alignment in the cultures, and investing in long-term strategies for a stronger brand like legal technology.
Okay, thank you so much for your analysis. Now, the managing partner of Eurolegal has entered the room, and they'd like a summary of your recommendation of whether we should move forward with this acquisition and why.
Okay. So you asked whether Eurolegal should move forward with the acquisition of U.S. Legal, and I believe we should move forward if 3 conditions are met: if partner retention is secured, if the billing integration planning is aligned, and if regulatory risks are mitigated. As we outlined, the revenue synergies are I would move forward with this deal if the I would move. You asked whether Euro Legal should proceed with acquiring U.S. Legal. I think that we should, but we need to take a closer look at three things: the revenue synergies, the cost synergies, and the risks. We saw that the acquisition can add another potential revenue source from the U.S., and that these client bases could be mined with cross-selling activities that could generate additional revenue. We saw that cost synergies are realizable in terms of reducing billing inefficiencies as well as consolidating offices and technologies. But we also need to mitigate the risks in terms of leadership attrition, especially the rainmakers. To do this, we want to offer tailored incentives to ensure that these rainmakers are with the firm for at least until the synergies are realized. If these factors are addressed, I would proceed with the acquisition, but I would recommend a sort of phased expansion strategy after the acquisition. But we can look into the exact numbers as next steps for the standalone value of the firm, as well as whether the synergies actually play out in a pro forma basis. All right, that was a lot of intellectual labor. It was fun. Would I be hired? I'm not sure. I do see the kind of overall benefit of case interviews for consultants, but even more generally, like, it's a systematic approach to problem solving, and you can dissect any sort of complex issue, whether it's like business or not, through different frameworks and ways to test hypotheses and sort of plug in data. These analytic pathways are very common in sort of law. There's like little tests that judges lay out so that lawyers can go through them and just sort of plug in the different facts of the case. But also in philosophy, there's sort of conceptual analysis or analysis that breaks down issues into its constituent parts and trying to go part for part and breaking it down. Additionally, like, there's a communication portion. Mine was probably weak, but there's a kind of practice of articulating structured arguments and presenting clear reasoning and doing it right on the spot with the pressure of the interview or a client right in front of you, and doing it in these sort of high stakes environments is a good skill. It's like being in court and trying to come up with an argument on the spot, except it's even harder because sometimes you don't know the facts ahead of time and you can't strategize ahead of time. You just kind of pelt it at you and see how you deal with it in a matter of minutes or seconds.